Romeo and Juliet is the most ubiquitous romance in Western canon. When you hear the phrase love story, a near 500-year-old English play is the most recalled piece of fiction on the topic.
Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night.
Centuries-old poetics now sit as a zeitgeist of what love looks like. And anecdotally, I have asked all the youngest English-speaking adults I know. They all know how it ends. Despite essentially being the romance story, it ends in tragedy. Spoilers for this flobbity-jillion-year-old narrative, Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet both die. Star-crossed lovers from warring families fall in love. Their familial ties mean that their love will bring about struggle and strife for them both, so they concoct a plan to fake their own deaths in order to escape the clutches of their respective stations. Then, due to some terrible miscommunications, Romeo finds Juliet in a state indistinguishable from death, though she is actually alive. Stricken with grief, Romeo ends himself for realsies, and Juliet wakes up to find her lover duppied off this mortal coil. And then to complete the kill cam, she RCXDs herself. Romeo and Juliet is as much a tragedy as it is a romance. I think this is kind of weird. Well, kind of. I understand that stories require conflict, and often the depth of those conflicts can be further than our protagonists are ever really expected to escape, but the story about love ends in our lovers dying tragically young and relatively gruesomely. Is this even remotely what love is supposed to look like? Are we meant to want to die in the line of duty for a relationship that we need to be at war just to maintain? Well, no. We're not meant to want capital D drama in our lives any more than we're meant to want, like, I don't know, cigarettes, bruises, but like, tell that to a love bite. So it turns out my shock is misplaced. Our media is practically overflowing with unhealthy depictions of romance and love. We are inundated with, like, Ted Mosby. He is meant to be this lovelorn narrator, nice guying his way through relationships in a quest to find the mother of his kids, hence How I Met Your Mother. But like, no, I'm not going to cover the whole breadth of it, just do a quick YouTube search, but Ted is this pushy, doesn't take no for an answer kind of D-bag. Throughout the series, he lies, he cheats, and he performs several illegal acts. He is generally seen doing whatever he wants for his own gratification at the expense of everyone around him. Ross Geller from Friends also fits the same archetype of nice guy who just really isn't nice under any scrutiny. There is also plenty of romanticized coercion and abuse. Edward Cullen, the poster boy of the Twilight novels, is a 104-year-old man who took it upon himself to date the most mentally unwell minor in the local high school. And like, I'm not going to be the one to put a hard and fast rule on it, but I just want you to know that as a 27-year-old, I physically gag at the idea of dating anyone under 21, let alone someone who is 87 years younger. Twilight is fucking gross. And frankly, putting up a lens to many fictional relationships will just unlock this depth of sadness in a lot of them. An example that I think is incredible is the character of Marge Simpson from The Simpsons. In the Simpsons household, Marge is often dwarfed by the much louder and more expressive personalities of Homer, Bart, and Lisa. But if you look across the history of The Simpsons, the glimpses we get of Marge show this brilliant, creative, and considerate woman whose good nature is continuously stretched, bent, and bruised by the endless output required to upkeep a less than functional family. With her life as a suburban housewife being the only mode of being she will ever get to experience, despite her clear capability for things greater and more complex. And like, Homer and Marge are one of TV's quintessential couples. As a mother figure, I get that we might expect her to sacrifice in order to provide, but as an individual, could you imagine if this were you? Can you imagine stagnating in such totality just for a man so oblivious to your brilliance as Homer J. Simpson? None of this is to say that Homer doesn't have his moments, or that these characters don't authentically love each other. It's more to say that when you take a closer look, what we are being sold is something deeply flawed and at times really tragic. All this struggle, the alcoholism, the child strangling, the constant picking up of pieces, should this be the thing that dots your skyline? Is this what relationship goals look like? No, of course not. And yet, I love the idea of turning myself inside out for relationships. Do you ever just imagine belonging to another person? The security of being the guy who can pin a sunshine in another person's sky. I have this intense desire to break my body for another person. Avatar: Last Airbender is a show that should need no introduction, but my mom watches these videos, so I'm going to explain it anyway. The Avatar: Last Airbender is a Nickelodeon animation that first aired in Jesus shitting Christ. In a world inhabited by people capable of bending the four elements to their will, the Avatar is this divine bringer of peace who will use their mastery of all four elements to maintain order between nations and spirits alike. The Avatar is a reincarnated being, with one only appearing sometime after the previous Avatar has passed away. And as such, they are able to tap into something called the Avatar state. This is a state that kind of bridges a connection between the current living Avatar and all previous incarnations of them, which grant them access to skills and power beyond what currently resides in their mortal frame. However, when younger, less experienced avatars are still training, the Avatar state is not something that they can always willingly control. In Season 2, Episode 19, The Guru, we find our protagonist Avatar Aang seeking guidance from Guru Patik, a 150-year-old nomad who has a great understanding of all things spiritual. Guru Patik knows how to teach Aang how to access and control the Avatar state at will. This is done by unlocking his 7 chakra. The body is a stream clogged by lies, grief, and shame. One by one, Avatar Aang graduates from each spiritual ill. He undergoes a kind of spiritual therapy, doing away with all worldly burdens in order to free his spirit. Until it comes to the 7th, final chakra. A chakra that deals in cosmic energy and is subsequently blocked by earthly attachments. The final step between Aang and the impossible strength of every previous incarnation. Aang casts his mind to the one earthly thing that he is most attached to. He is unable to let her go. In the narrative, this is pitched as a serious obstacle. We, as the audience, are meant to want our protagonist to overcome the shortcoming, but I don't. I want him to be so stupid. I want him to be so in love that he'd shoot himself in the proverbial foot if only to prove the depth of this love. I want the world to ask him the question, do you love this person? And I want me to meet the question with such blind conviction that there is no room for doubt. I want him to love foolishly because the question of love has always felt like some flavor of saying, does any of this really matter? And then the only real answer has always been, if it doesn't matter, then why does it hurt so much? There's this dangerous idea that suffering is legitimizing, that the hill you die on can be made a little bit taller if you bleed before you touch the dirt. I have this issue that seems to keep cropping up with how I treat sacrifice in relation to my love languages. When I think that I'm really, really in love with someone, I have the capacity to just... I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. I get this stupid willingness to put myself out, to injure myself or mess up my finances, make myself physically ill or mentally unwell. I get this feeling that loving somebody won't be good enough, so I have to, go further. This was at its worst back in secondary school. I had a friend who had a maladaptive coping mechanism involving bladed objects. There are a lot of reasons why I did what I did. but I needed to show that I was capable of empathizing with them. So I did it too. And it became a habit that stretched over several years. I have this fear that one day I will put too much into a relationship and then I will wind up with less than nothing. There are so few things that you can literally bet your life on, like heart surgery or starting a new business. You can take massive calculated risks in your life, and somehow choosing to try and love another person has always felt like the scariest fucking thing. Relationships facilitate a lot of give and take. When you go into a relationship looking to fill something that feels empty within you, you don't realize how hollow and gaping you can feel when you no longer have someone to take from. Hibaro is probably my single favorite thing sitting in the Netflix catalog right now. It's a 17-minute short film as part of the third season for the animation anthology Love, Death, and Robots. An audiovisual experience that tells the story of a band of conquistadors, knights rallying together in a dense forest area inexplicably punctuated by this big lake. The perspective seems to focus on one of the knights above the rest, and every time it does, the audio muffles. The man is deaf, oblivious to all the noisy activity behind him. Suddenly, an entity rises from the lake. This impossible beacon of opulescence, a siren whose very skin may be literally made out of gold. How do we know she's a siren? At the sound of the siren's call, the entire company of knights and priests are drawn into a dancing bloodlust. Bodies upon bodies of men fling themselves into the water, cutting each other down and spinning in a rhythmic trance. In a matter of seconds, every man whose ears were touched by the song is now dead, meeting their ultimate end either at the end of somebody's blade or at the bottom of the waters. When all is said and done, the deaf knight and the siren sight each other. The siren seeing the only creature that's ever gave her cause for surprise, and the knight seeing what is simultaneously the scariest and most enrapturing thing he will ever come to know. So they pursue each other. A sequence passes, with she finding the only warm body she's ever had the ability to lie next to, and he having a brush with the divine. I can't think of a feeling more comparable with love. The extremes of safety and vulnerability, curiosity and trepidation all at play simultaneously. A love bite is still a bruise. A love bite is still a bruise. A love bite is still a bruise. A love bite is still... I remember how Romeo and Juliet ended. The knight was interested in gold, and as such he pilfers her unconscious body of every speck he is capable of carrying, and her bleeding body is discarded, returned to the lake where so many others perished. And in some insane twist of fate, the river reacts. This colossal ebbing throng of blood races through the lake and steadily saturates the waters. This is while the knight is off taking stock of his plunder. After the waters calm, the knight goes to have a drink from the river, and presumably the blood of a siren contained the one thing that gold could not buy. A cure for his deafness. In an instant, our knight is assaulted with a barrage of 1,000 new sounds, birdsong, wind whipping its way through the trees and the delicate foliage underfoot. He can hear everything, including... Hibaro sits on a short list of media that has made me cry. There's a lot of room for allegory in the short film, but when I watch it, I imagine quite literally staring femininity in the face and dying in pursuit of it. I imagine being so enraptured by someone that I could reduce myself to a dead thing. On both sides of the equation, I imagine needing so much that I come out of a relationship as this lovesick, bloated monster starving for the safety that a lover can give. And in equal parts, I imagine twisting my body, breaking my frame and lacerating my skin to fit the mold that somebody thought they needed for my love to be something they could consume. I imagine both being the meal and the plate of bones afterwards. And let me tell you, there is no metaphor here. Some days I wake up and put love on the pedestal. I want to worship my partner for choosing me, and I want my sweat and blood to spill in the desire to polish their shine. There's a version of this video that ended with that sentence, because there's a version of me that really wanted to lean into that feeling. Love is one of these high-gravity feelings that seem to sit on top of every single other feeling. I have the emotional intelligence to put down pride or anger or many other feelings, but love is really, really heavy and incredibly hard to compartmentalize. It's harder to just put aside like other feelings. So what do? Let's go back to Romeo and Juliet. At the start of the video, I explained that I think it's weird how a tragedy is meant to resemble what love looks like, and I think my earlier assertion is wrong. I think Romeo and Juliet is a bad example of what a relationship should be, but not a bad example of love. It serves as a cautionary tale to illustrate just how willingly the human spirit will destroy itself for love. These two children, in defiance of their families, martyred themselves because they saw that as a more preferable fate than ever being apart. Vendetta is one of those words that is so strong that people don't even bother to translate it. Italian just seems to be the strongest language to accent the idea of a blood feud. Romeo and Juliet is a story about love because even in death, the love sends shockwaves throughout Verona, bringing an end to a long-standing family vendetta. It gives love this mystical quality to it. Love will fix what is broken. Love will triumph over every last thing. Love conquers all. That's a powerful idea, and don't get me wrong, love conquers a lot. But you know what it didn't conquer? Gideon Graves, the final boss of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. In an admission of feelings towards Ramona, Scott unlocks a power buried deep inside him. He gets the power of love, a sword he will use to go toe-to-toe with Gideon. This does not work, and love is not strong enough. So he gets a second life, and he tries again. And this time he says it with his chest, "I'm doing this for me." And a second, more powerful sword, the power of self-respect, bursts from his chest. Loving is for the lover. It's one dimension of the spectrum of what you can put out into the world, and it cannot be your everything. It can't be what you live for, and it certainly shouldn't be what you die for. There's this myth that comes from Plato, that humans were once much more powerful beings with two faces and two pairs of arms and legs, and in this four-armed, four-legged state we posed such a bigger threat to the gods that Zeus had to cut us in half and doom us to spend our lives looking for the other half of ourselves. I spent years treating this like the one truth, like I was this cold, incomplete chassis missing the rest of my frame, and so I lived like this was true, like I was half a person, and after doing it for too long, here is all I want to say. I think that pain and suffering in the pursuit and maintenance of love can be a very, very real part of people's journeys. Not everyone has the luxury of all of the pieces lining up perfectly, but I know it can't be your everyday. Love will not be made real by subjecting yourself to pain. It will breathe and grow in the peace between. I don't know enough to pass on wisdom. I am not about to tell you exactly what love should or should not look like. What I will tell you is I will not try to love you like Romeo, nor Homer, nor Ted, nor Scott. I will not love you in a way that resembles a star-crossed tragedy or a feature-length film. I would not end it all for you. But I will think about it. I will approach you thinking about catching grenades and bankrupting myself. I will think about grand gestures and diamond rings, and I will see you, and for just a moment I will think that you might be the person that will fix me. And I will remind myself that despite how real these feelings may be, I will not break myself to love you. I, like with everything I make, will come to you with something built on the mistakes of every last failed attempt, and I will say, I made this for you.